Climate change is knocking hard on Spain's doors. Some parts of the country are turning into deserts, sterile, barren wastelands ill-suited for life. The United Nations estimates that 74% of the country is in the process of desertification, while 18% of Spain could become irreversibly desert. The regions Almeria, Valencia, and Andalusia are the most vulnerable. If left unchecked, by 2100, most of the southern half of Spain will be a desert. Madrid is facing nothing less than an existential crisis, and it couldn't come at a worse time. Spain is a major exporter of agricultural goods to Europe, earning the nickname breadbasket of Europe. However, Ukraine, the other breadbasket, is in crisis. Global prices and supply chains are facing disruptions as a result. If the Spanish supply chains also break down, it could very well tip the scale and ignite a catastrophe with global ramifications. Madrid must find ways to preserve its status as Europe's breadbasket while simultaneously fighting off the march of the desert. The truth is, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our descendants. Spain isn't alone in the problems it faces. Climate crises are destabilizing trade routes all over the world. Water levels are drying up from the Panama Canal to the Mississippi River, jeopardizing a sector that's already spiraling after Russia's withdrawal from a crucial wheat deal. Crop yields and grain supplies are in jeopardy, and some global strategists expect wheat prices to surge by as much as 15% annually. Experts are now admitting what we worried about all along. A recession is still likely, and it's likely coming soon. So you can't afford to let your hard-earned savings sit in markets that might be affected, right? That's exactly why I and thousands of my subscribers have discovered an asset class that's consistently been resilient during global catastrophes. Billionaires wanted it, but nearly 55,000 everyday investors got it first and profited every time, with blue-chip art thanks to our sponsors at Masterworks. Masterworks recently made their 16th contemporary art sale thus far for investors. In fact, it was their 16th straight exit to deliver positive returns to their investors. No wonder over 800,000 people have joined the platform to invest in legendary works from Picasso, Basquiat, and Banksy. But today, CaspianReport subscribers can still skip the waitlist and start investing now by clicking the link in the description. See important disclosures at masterworks.com/cd. Water is the lifeblood of civilization, but in a rapidly changing climate, the presence of this indispensable resource is increasingly finite. Nowhere is this more apparent than in Spain. The Iberian Peninsula is a world unto itself. Though part of Europe, its economic and political challenges are as unique as its physical setting. In the north, the Pyrenees wall the peninsula off from the European plain, imbuing its territories with a maritime orientation. Meanwhile, its rugged internal geography has historically complicated efforts to maintain internal cohesion, let alone centralized rule. In particular, Iberia's southern tip lies but 14 kilometers from North Africa. In the 8th century, Arab armies exploited this geographic closeness to conquer most of the peninsula. Over the next 7 centuries, Islamic hegemony gradually rolled back. After the last Arab emirate fell in 1492, Spain's Atlantic orientation allowed it to fund voyages and build a vast overseas empire. Spain's glory days are gone and finished. Its contemporary geopolitical objectives are more modest, focusing less on conquest and expansion and more on issues closer to home. While its territory today is secure from invading armies, Madrid now faces a different, insidious enemy: the advancing threat of desertification. Drought, heat, deforestation, and limited rainfall are terraforming Spain's geography, turning it into a wasteland. There is an expression in Spain that reflects the gravity of the situation: En Abril aguas mil, meaning April will bring the rains. Only this year it didn't. Recent winter and spring seasons have been particularly unkind. The month of April was the driest since records began in 1961. However, the drought and heat wave are part of a larger change. Despite being surrounded by open oceans, Spain's internal regions are running out of water. In Valencia, Murcia, Castilla-La Mancha, and Extremadura, the available water stock dropped below 40% of total capacity. In Catalonia and Andalusia, water reserves have dropped as low as 25% of capacity. Now, the change is affecting its agricultural sector. Spanish farmers are awaiting their lowest yield in decades. Only crops near the coastline or desalination plants are expected to make it through. The rest of the country is facing an uphill battle. But part of the blame also rests with the practices of Spanish farmers. If anything, the changing climate shows the limits of Spain's agricultural model, which was designed on the premise of limitless water supply. For added context, Spain's agricultural sector accounts for as much as 80% of the country's freshwater consumption. The return on investment has been substantial. Spain's biggest exports in terms of value are wine and olive oil, while in terms of volume, vines lead with 39 million tons of production, followed by cereals. This thriving agricultural foreign trade generates a surplus of more than 17 billion euros for Spain. It also reduces Central Europe's need for imports from outside the Eurozone, especially for exotic fruits that are difficult to grow. In total, Spain's agricultural exports accounted for more than 50 billion euros in 2021. True, feeding an entire continent is big business, but everything has a price. For Spain, that price is not measured in euros, but in soil degradation. Looking at things from space, neighboring Portugal is significantly greener owing to a lack of large-scale agriculture. Some parts of Spain look like islands of brown in a sea of green. This is especially true in the Tabernas in Almeria, the only hot desert in Europe. Drought and heat are now exacerbating Spain's water deficit. Not surprisingly, farmers are among the first to suffer the consequences of a water shortage. To this end, since the 1950s, Madrid has tackled water shortages through infrastructure development. It constructed hundreds of dams and water diversion systems to create a sophisticated distribution network. In all, the country has about 1,200 artificial dams and reservoirs, the most of any European state. These facilities are mainly found in the country's southern half, where agricultural zones are the most intense. Take this footage from Almeria, for instance. A sea of plastic canopy stretches over the landscape. The operation fills more than 16,000 football fields of greenhouses. It's so vast that it's visible from outer space. While these greenhouses have transformed Almeria into one of Europe's most productive agricultural regions, they pose significant environmental challenges. The intensive farming methods employed here rely heavily on water drawn from aquifers, contributing to groundwater depletion in an area already prone to drought and water scarcity. Moreover, the use of plastic sheets, pesticides, and fertilizers has sparked concerns over soil degradation and water pollution. Year in and out, each greenhouse grows a single crop. However, each year the soil degrades and aquifers deplete faster, all contributing to desertification. Make no mistake, Almeria's industrialized agriculture is an economic miracle, but it is an environmental nightmare nonetheless. Simultaneously, to the north of Spain, the Ebro River basin faces numerous complications from mismanagement. The Ebro is one of Spain's major rivers. It flows southeast for more than 900 kilometers before emptying into the Mediterranean Sea. The basin is a crucial water system supporting a wide range of economic activities, including agriculture, industry, and hydroelectric power generation. However, precipitation has decreased in recent years, while agricultural consumption has steadily increased. The Ebro's flow has now reduced to the point that entire wildlife species have disappeared from the area. The ecological habitats are under stress. If no change is made to Spain's water administration, the mighty Ebro River will eventually become bone dry. Still more, in the La Mancha region, local aquifers face irreversible depletion. La Mancha is widely known for its agricultural activity, including cultivating vineyards and olive orchards. However, the over-extraction of groundwater for irrigation has led to a decline in water levels, jeopardizing the long-term sustainability of both the natural ecosystem and agricultural productivity. The depleting aquifers also pose a risk to the quality of the remaining water, making it more susceptible to contamination. The long-term hazards for Spain are real. The country needs a more sustainable approach to water management. The core problem is that its agricultural infrastructure was built on the presumption that there would be an endless water supply. The same infrastructure led the country to draw again and again from its reserves to support an industry designed to feed the rest of Europe. Spain did so for decades. Worse, it did so without moderation. Now, as climate change starts to take shape, Spain's industrialized agricultural model is no longer sustainable. The same regions where Spanish fruits and vegetables are grown are the most vulnerable to desertification. This includes Almeria province, but also Murcia, Valencia, and Andalusia. For years on end, annual rainfall accounted for 28% lower than forecast. The country is now wilting under severe drought. Climatic heat places even greater, constant strain on Spain's limited water resources. So much so that the Desertification Research Center in Valencia argues that a large part of Spain will turn into a desert in a few years. The United Nations, meanwhile, estimates that 74% of Spain is already in the process of desertification. Admittedly, Spain's geography has always been prone to drought. In fact, desertification in Iberia predates emissions-induced climate change. Historically, the region was largely covered by forests, dominated by maritime pine. These lush, expansive woodlands mitigated desertification by stabilizing the soil and preventing erosion. Moisture was drawn from the air, while plant cover softened incoming solar radiation and heat on the ground. As with most things environmental, human activity changed all this. Throughout antiquity, demand for lumber increased, chiefly for construction, heating, and charcoal for smelting. As a result, the maritime pines were gradually replaced with evergreen oaks. During the Middle Ages, deforestation assumed a military character as Christian forces sought to roll back and eventually expel Islamic civilization from Iberia. Later, in the early modern period, timber exploitation for shipbuilding gathered pace as Spain pursued transatlantic exploration. Forests were privatized and systematically harvested to meet the demands of ever-growing Spanish fleets. Over the centuries, these cumulative factors gradually depleted the native forests and disrupted the natural ecosystem. So, in a way, Spain has already undergone terraforming for the worse. It sacrificed its ancient native forests for empire building. However, these unsustainable agricultural practices have persisted into the present. Seen in this view, climate change is not the sole taproot for desertification. It is, however, a magnifier and multiplier. Increased droughts, hotter temperatures, and more extreme weather patterns increase stress on regions that are already water scarce. Ecosystems are thus struggling to recover, which hastens the encroachment of desert areas. Into the bargain, aquifer depletion and seawater intrusion contribute to water scarcity. Sea level rise, storms, and mismanagement of resources have led to increased salinity in coastal soils and reduced the abundance of water for agriculture. This has all sorts of implications. Foremost, desertification increases the risk of wildfires. In 2022, Spain suffered the largest number of wildfires in Europe, with more than 500 cases, according to the European Forest Fire Information System. The areas that are struck by wildfire then accelerate and spread the desertification process. Taken together, Madrid is up against enormous challenges. Low winter rainfall has induced a drought so severe that the government has approved 2.2 billion euros in emergency measures to assist farmers and build new water infrastructures. But if Spain is to remain the breadbasket of Europe, it needs to do more. Spanish lawmakers need to adapt urgently to the new world brought on by climate change. Its water management system needs to be overhauled from the ground up. Spain needs to develop ways to use and reuse water, including wastewater. Unattended leaks cost the country about 15% of its total water supply. These are the things Spain can do right away to remedy its water deficit. But, above all, the country needs to use water more thoughtfully. Granted, Spain has taken steps to combat desertification. It's not watching helplessly as the desert conquers land. The past century has seen reforestation initiatives and sustainable land practices gather pace. Initially, these efforts were focused primarily on preventing landslides. A notable example is the reforestation project in the Sierra de Espuña region of Murcia, carried out between 1901 and 1939. During the Franco era, these efforts were redoubled as make-work projects to alleviate unemployment, and they succeeded in reforesting 2.9 million hectares of Spanish forest, more than 11% of the total land area. The problem, though, was that such projects were not undertaken with a mind to ecological balance. Non-native species, like pine and eucalyptus, predominated reforestation efforts. Planting large monocultures of these trees increased the risk of forest fires. But despite these problems, some reports indicate that reforestation and conservation initiatives have increased forest cover in recent years. Innovations like fog capture nets have shown promise in harvesting moisture from the air to support vegetation growth. By collecting fog water droplets, these systems provide an alternate water source for plants in arid regions. Meanwhile, regenerative farming methods can rejuvenate soil quality and enhance its ability to hold water. Steering clear of monocultures and encouraging a variety of crops can further bolster ecosystem resilience and aid in water preservation. Spain needs to adopt like-minded innovations on a large scale to correct its water deficit and stop the march of the desert. It needs to start seeing things from an environmental perspective, not just a financial one. The well-being of soil is intrinsically tied to the well-being of society. The desert is nature's way of bankruptcy. Once the green is gone, all life pays the debt. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report, so if you haven't yet subscribed, now is a good time to do so. Just remember to click the bell icon, otherwise you'll still be missing out on our latest content. Thank you for watching, and Sarol.